So before we get building the Top Force Evo, let's have a quick look inside the box. Obviously we've got our Tamiya manual, pretty standard sort of layout in there. If you've ever seen a Tamiya kit, you'll know exactly what I mean. Then over here we have got all our plastic components. Those iconic red, is it red or orange wheels? Can't really tell in this light. Reddish orange, let's go with. We've got ball diffs. Nice. Again, lots and lots of plastic here. What have we got there? So it feels like, just from feeling the package there, it feels like a TBL02 ESC that's come with this one. Often you get Hobby Wing 1060s, but this one definitely feels like a TBL02 or TBL04, what we got there. So that is the TBL04S ESC, which goes with that. I'm not sure what I'm going to put in this car just yet. I'm thinking probably a Hobby Wing brushless system with a 10.5 turn brushless motor. Now, it's worth noting, obviously Jimmy has loaned me the egress, but I did bump into him whilst I was in the model shop the other day, and he suggested if I'm getting this car, I need to get some of these. These are the Yeah Racing carbon fibre shock towers. So I'm going to go with what he says. He knows his stuff. So that is so far the first upgrade that I have on this car. Coming over here, we have the pre-cut and pre-coloured shell. Wherefore we're not going to be able to go with our pop-along livery, which I would have quite liked to do. Looking at it, there's an under tray under there as well, which is on the underside there, so that's an under tray so we don't damage the chassis, which I'm hoping is going to be over here in this box. So in this box I'm hoping we have got all the components. Let's have a little look in here. So there we have our carbon fibre chassis, and looks good. What else we got in here? We have, again, carbon fibre shock tower. I think the reason he suggested I went with the Yeah Racing one is because it's a little bit thicker. In terms of motor, we have got a Tamiya motor. I believe that it'll be just a 27 turn, similar to like a Mabuchi. In fact, it is a Mabuchi motor, it says it on the side there. And then we have our oil filled shocks, another shock tower. There's the thrust race bearings, pinion, all good. So, enough waffle, let's get this into the car room and let's get building. So first bag is bag A, as you can see here, and that's 1 through till 7, and yeah, just going to work our way through the bag until we get this built. Now I don't know what I'm going to do at this stage actually, because I haven't decided what motor I'm going to run just yet, so I might have to hold fire on that. I actually have this little magnetised tray which I use to put my screws in. Definitely going to keep those in the bag until I need them, because I don't want to be looking for those. They will disappear if they hit the floor in this room. And obviously we've got our ceramic grease and diff grease. So it says here, apply synthetic rubber cement. And that is for these two parts here. So when you're putting the super glue in, what you want to do is make sure that the bearing doesn't get any super glue on, because you want that to be able to move freely. So set those aside and it's time to get on with the fiddly stuff. Adding a little bit of grease to the end of a screwdriver makes it much easier to sort of pick up the balls. I was fighting against the magnetic tray, but it's all about keeping these balls nice and safe. And I've already put a little bit of grease on the diff housing, so once they go down, they stick in. Really simple, nice, easy process. These are really small, so be very careful when placing these in, because they will roll away and disappear. It is important to make sure that you get these facing in the right direction, as I said before. And then these little balls in here are absolutely tiny. But once you put it all together, I found actually holding the end and just using this to tighten it up initially before putting in the other cup. But that is the first diff done. Be sure to get your little G3 bits off of there to go on the end of these. So I'm not going to be whacking loads of grease all over these gears when I put them in. What I've learned from many years of racing in the Iconic Cup with the TT01s is you want minimal sort of friction, and you want them to run really nicely, so they won't be adding any grease to these. So if we look at the shock towers, from the front they're pretty much the same, but side on you can see that the Yeah Racing one is considerably thicker than the Tamiya one, so therefore a little bit more sturdy, a little bit more durable, and that's why I was advised to upgrade to the Yeah Racing shock towers. So that is what I'm going to do. When it comes to measuring out the turnbuckles, 28mm, I always use my set of calipers to make sure I get it as close as possible. So I was worried that with the thicker shock tower I might need slightly longer screws, but there's loads of space on the back here, so it hasn't actually made any difference. Just stick with the 12mm screw to go in the back there. So a couple of things to note. I was advised to replace these tapping screws for hex ones, so I've got myself a box of screws, so I can also have the hexes rather than the crosshead. I'm going to hold off on putting this part in because I'm not sure what motor I'm going to run just yet. So I'm going to hold fire on this and move on to the next step. Next bit is pretty straightforward in terms of putting these arms together. I didn't actually have the 20mm M3 screws, so I have gone with the original screws for this bit, but all the other screws at the moment I am converting over to these. In terms of putting these together, again, quite straightforward, little grub screw in there. So moving on to the next step. So the toughest part so far is actually getting these little E-clips on. This is the most challenging one, just because there's a little less room to do it. Ideally, I would have clipped on the back one last, but unfortunately the angle doesn't allow you to get this in from the front, so had to do it the other way around. But that was a little bit fiddly. Other than that, we're all good. And then we just screw the arms to the uprights, and the rear of the car is pretty much done. All moving nice and freely there. Now that the rear of the car is finished, we're moving on to the front, and we're pretty much going to go through exactly the same process as we have for the rear, because we're going to be building up the diffs and connecting them up. So it's almost the same process, but just slightly different geometry for the front part. At this stage of the build, when we're sorting out the front diffs and the gearing, you have a choice between a one-way gear and over here the counter gear. Again, this is going to affect your performance. I'm setting this up for low grip on grass, therefore I'm thinking I'm going to stick with the standard counter gear, whereas the one way is probably better on higher grip tracks. Obviously the front has the steering, so therefore these uprights are slightly different to the rear. Shock tower is pretty much done, and then it's just about making up these and getting them all fitted together. One problem I did come up with, using the ever so slightly thicker Yeah Racing front shock mount, if you place this bolt here in the suggested hole, which is that one there, it actually touches on this part here of the chassis, and it won't clip in properly. So by moving it down a hole and out, it fits in just fine. So I'm just going to have to change the geometry of these turnbuckles to ensure that the car's set up how I want it. But that is the first little issue I've had with this build, and that's because I'm running a slightly thicker Yeah Racing shock tower. So I've just put the front end together, and as you can see where I've adjusted this hole, these are a little bit long and standing out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait till the buggy's built, and then I'm just going to adjust these to get it set up. So obviously at the moment there's a lot of camber here, and I need it to be at a slightly different angle. So easy fix, but it's going to have to wait until I've put a little bit more of the car together and got the shocks in place. Then I'll just double check the front wheels. We now have the front and the rear of the car sorted. The next job actually to get on with is the shocks. So we're going to get the shocks built up and added to these, and then once you've done that, once the shocks are done, we can move on to the chassis. So the shock build, bag E, and here it is. Everything you need is in there, including oil. So I am provisionally, I'm going to build them with the stock out the box oils. I might do a little bit of research on setup, and I might change that actually when it comes to filling them up. But let's get these built up in the first instance. Now over here we've got the rear shocks, and on this side we've got the front shocks. Now looking at it, I'll correct this if I am wrong, but at the moment the only difference between the front and rear shocks is this piece here, which is a spacer which goes in the front shocks. The Y1 spacer sits under the piston, which will shorten the travel of the front shocks. But looking at it, the same numbers appear for the items like the ME9, and then over here we've got the ME9. So I believe that is the only difference. So I'm going to make up all the shocks in one hit and just place these in the front ones. These shocks are so nicely machined. They are stunning. Really looking forward to getting these built up. Yeah, really nice. So when it comes to doing the shocks, because you've got to get the oil out and there's lots of mess potentially that could happen, I do prefer to get them all done in one go. So I'm trying to keep them separate in terms of the fronts and the rears, but most of the phases and the steps that you go through in the construction of the shocks are the same for both. In building these, I have noticed one other change. So on the rear shock, you have this one here, which is an ME3 spacer, whereas on the front shock, you have the Y1, which goes on the inside. So if I can focus this up, you can see those silver spacers there on the rears, whereas these ones are shorter because they have the plastic spacer on the inside. When it comes to screwing in the shocks, a set of shock pliers tends to help out, so you can just clamp that without damaging the shaft. So now they are pretty much all built. It's just a case of filling up with oil. Now I have opted to stick with the oil that comes in the kit, and I will probably test run the vehicle and then change the oil if needed. So simply I put the shocks onto my car stand. It's got the holes, and then just filled them up, pump them to get rid of all the air bubbles. Then you add this little bladder in and it's all good. So when it comes to attaching the bottom of the shock, these are little plastic spacers that go in there. Don't get them confused with the metal ones that go in the top. So there are metal ones for the top, plastic ones for the bottom. Shocks are now on, and with the front shocks, you need to determine how many of these spacers you want in. What I've done initially is I have basically set the shocks to where they sit naturally, and then just filled in the space. So I've taken that top one out, and you can see that there's still a gap there because the shocks are shorter than, sorry, the springs are shorter than the shocks. So you need those spacers, and I've done it so you haven't got the slop in there. So I've literally just matched up the space. Front and rear of the car are now done. The next part, as we move through the manual, is it's time to get the chassis out, put in where the battery goes, and then we start work on the steering rack. Now we move on to the chassis. Carbon fibre chassis. It is worth noting, when you are building this, you can see this side's countersunk and this side isn't. So it's important you get that the right way round, otherwise your screws ain't going to go in proper. So yeah, we've got the countersunk side there for the bottom of the chassis. Now we're starting to work on the steering rack. Simply screw these in. I haven't used any Loctite, but I'm thinking might not be a bad idea. Well, we'll see how it goes. I have to say, I haven't used any Loctite on building these, but it might be something I need to do in the future. So for the steering, we've got the turnbuckles that need to be done. Again, using the calipers to get them as close to the measurements as it says in the manual. All coming together now. So again, once you've put the steering rack in, you've got to make sure it is moving smoothly, which this is. So we can move on to the next step. Next up, the rear of the car attaches. It's quite simple really. It's 2 screws here and 2 underneath, and the whole of the rear of the car is now attached. So next up, I am going to be fitting the front of the car. But we've got this little part here, another one there, which we need to attach this in, which is going to be the drive or prop shaft that runs down the middle. So you just need to put that in, then you attach the front, and then you screw it all down. Really starting to look like a buggy now. Prop shaft is in place, and it's literally just the one screw here that's holding it in place, because what I need to do is flip it over now. The next step, you're putting screws in from the bottom. And there it is, the Top Force Evo. Now this is where I'm actually going to finish this build for now, because all that I need to do is add a servo, add the electrics, and then pretty much put the top deck on, and this car is as good as done. So I haven't actually got the electrics for this car just yet, so I will be finishing just here. So if you're interested in finding out how I get on with the Top Force Evo, like, subscribe, hit the old ding dong bell, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.